It is often claimed that there is no censorship of the creationary viewpoint in scientific journals. Creationists could certainly publish if they would just bother to do legitimate science, it is said. Think so? Let's consider a case that happened not long ago at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. In March 2004, Dr. Stephen C. Meyer, a Cambridge-educated scientist and an intelligent design proponent, but one who is not a young Earth creationist, submitted the paper, The Origin of Biological Information and the Higher Taxonomic Categories, to the peer-reviewed journal Proceedings of the Biological Society of Washington. Dr. Richard Sternberg, then managing editor, followed the standard operating procedures for publication in the Proceedings. The paper underwent a standard peer review process by 3 qualified scientists, all of whom are evolutionary and molecular biologists teaching at well-known institutions. The reviewers provided substantial criticism and feedback to Dr. Meyer, who then made significant changes to the paper in response. Dr. Roy McDermott, president of the Council of the Biological Society of Washington, reviewed the peer review file and concluded that the peer reviews were in support of Sternberg's decision to publish the article. The paper was subsequently published in August 2004. However, the publication of the paper sparked a firestorm of controversy by incensed evolutionists across the country. Unable to undo the fact that the paper had already been published, evolutionists focused their fanatical rage on Dr. Sternberg, who had allowed the heretical paper to be published. The outpourings of hatred resulted in discriminatory harassment of Dr. Sternberg by senior Smithsonian scientists and the administration, where he was a research associate at the National Museum of Natural History. All of this despite the fact that Sternberg is an evolutionary scientist with 2 doctorates in biology, one in molecular evolution and the other in theoretical biology. On Sternberg's website, he documents the harassment he endured. First, they tried to remove him from the museum by creating an intolerable working environment so that he would be forced to resign. Second, they put pressure on the National Institute of Health, for whom he worked, to fire him. Third, Smithsonian officials enlisted the help of Eugenie Scott, director of the National Center for Science Education, to monitor Sternberg's outside activities in an attempt to investigate his personal religious and political beliefs in gross violation of his privacy and First Amendment rights. Fourth, Sternberg's professional reputation, private life, and ethics were repeatedly impugned and publicly smeared with false allegations by government employees working in tandem with the National Center for Science Education. Fifth, he was repeatedly pressured to reveal the names of the peer reviewers of Meyer's article, contrary to professional ethics, presumably so they could also be harassed. He was also told repeatedly that he should have found peer reviewers who would reject the article out of hand, again in direct violation of professional ethics, which require editors to find peer reviewers who are not prejudiced nor hostile to a particular author or his or her ideas. It is clear that Sternberg was targeted for retaliation and harassment explicitly because he failed in an unstated requirement in his role as editor of a scientific journal. He was supposed to be a gatekeeper, turning away unpopular, controversial, or conceptually challenging explanations of puzzling natural phenomena. Instead, he allowed a scientific article to be published critical of neo-Darwinism, and that was considered an unpardonable heresy. This Nazi-like treatment was first exposed in a Wall Street Journal opinion piece titled "The Branding of a Heretic" by David Klinghoffer, who said, "Darwinism is an essential ingredient in secularism, that aggressive, quasi-religious faith without a deity. The Sternberg case seems in many ways an instance of one religion persecuting a rival, demanding loyalty from anyone who enters any one of its churches, like the National Museum of Natural History." So defaming were Klinghoffer's accusations that a Congressional Oversight Committee investigated the claims and publicly released its findings in December 2006, entitled Intolerance and the Politicization of Science at the Smithsonian. Smithsonian's top officials permit the demotion and harassment of scientists skeptical of Darwinian evolution. In the report summary, Congressional investigators concluded, the staff investigation has uncovered compelling evidence that Dr. Sternberg's civil and constitutional rights were violated by Smithsonian officials. Moreover, the agency's top officials, Secretary Lawrence Small and Deputy Secretary Sheila Black, have shown themselves completely unwilling to rectify the wrongs that were done or even to genuinely investigate the wrongdoings. The failure of Small and Burke to take any action against such discrimination raises serious questions about the Smithsonian's willingness to protect the free speech and civil rights of scientists who may hold dissenting views on topics such as biological evolution. So there we have Dr. Sternberg, who is not a creationist by any means, whose free speech and civil rights have been violated simply because he allowed a non-Darwinian to publish a scientific paper in an academic journal. Because evolutionists persecuted one of their own, every editor of every scientific journal in the world, seeing what has happened to Dr. Sternberg, will never put their career on lines. Folks, that's called censorship by peer pressure. It's also known as bullying. And yet, naive simpletons maintain the mindless mantra that there is no discrimination in scientific journals.